Hi, my name is Yona. I'm the after school leader at Field Teen Center, and today, just for fun, I've got a genre book tag. I'm going to be answering questions about different books that I've read and just naming a bunch of them for you. These aren't all going to be young adult books, again, because it's just for fun, but I hope it'll be interesting to hear about some of the different books that I've read. I really liked The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. In general, she writes stories about fairies, and they're very tricky, and they have riddles and contracts, and they're decadently dark and beautiful. And that's true in this book, but I especially liked this first book in her Folk of the Air trilogy because we get to see Jude being Jude, which is to say she's not always making the best decisions, but man, is it metal to be like, poison me? You can't poison me. I'm gonna poison myself first. Like, okay, girl, you do you. Love to see it. Nothing says horror quite like zombies, and for me, nothing says zombies like Dreadnation. Justina Ireland is just so effective in showing us who these characters are and balancing some of the natural humor that comes out between these characters without feeling forced against some of the really terrible choices they have to make and just horrible things happening to them. And I think that this really works for me as horror because it's really just about racism, which is pretty horrifying and upsetting. Like, it's horror because it's real. But it's not too real because it is also set shortly after the Civil War, so they're like hiking up their skirts to kick zombies in the face, and that's pretty fun too. I really enjoyed Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. She's come under fire recently for some of her political views, which is totally fair, but I think this book is just a fun ride. I feel like it addresses some of the weird technological and social places that we're right on the edge of right now and takes them to their furthest logical conclusion, which is a thing that sci-fi is known to do, is to take the present and extrapolate and imagine what it might look like a little bit into the future. This one appeals to me just because it's really grappling with climate change and ecologies, and it has an unreliable main character who's like really obsessed with this girl. And although we kind of sympathize with him, the story makes it pretty clear that that's not necessarily what this girl wants or that it's the right thing to do. Again, Margaret Atwood is not necessarily the most politically perfect person, but she's old. Of course she's not. So if you are not interested in giving her any of your money, great, just check it out from the library instead, where it's already been paid for. Romance is tricky for me because sometimes it can feel kind of saccharine, or like the characters lose their personalities once they start to fall in love with each other. So my favorite kind of love story is always one where the characters have some kind of other goal, or there's a barrier between them getting together that isn't just a silly misunderstanding. And my favorite example of this is in The Little Drummer Girl by John le Carré, which is a spy novel. And it's really about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and the love story takes shape around it. So it's not really an easy conflict to resolve, and it ends pretty messily, but also, oh my God, they're pining for each other so much. And you're really not sure. Does he feel this way about her? Does he not, the entire time? Because they're just layering all this fiction on top of it. You can't tell what's real and what's not. So it's a very interesting story. It's very dense, but very worth the time. It's hard to go wrong with Pride and Prejudice. I think that her social commentary is pretty funny, and I really enjoy the way that both the mom and the dad kind of fail Lizzie, but in different ways. So the satire in there is really fun. And I also just enjoy the conceit of like these two main characters really don't understand each other, and that's why they don't get along at first, because they're not great at communicating with each other and they butt heads. And the more they get to know each other, the more they realize that actually they're not that different. All right, I'm cheating because this isn't one book, but many books. But as a kid, I collected the heck out of the Goosebumps series. I was very excited to have them on a little line on my shelf. And, you know, I'm not even sure how much I really liked all of them. I thought they were kind of campy and cheesy, but I enjoyed it. And I loved the book covers. They're beautiful. They're super weird, but very cool. And some of the stories did really stick with me. There was one about like the egg monster from Mars. There was one of the Goosebumps spin-off books about a werecat girl. And something about it, just the aesthetic, I guess, really appealed to me as a kid. Probably the same part of my brain that really liked slime and sticky hands. I was like, yes, give me monster blood. I want that. And I got it. For some reason, the first book that comes to mind for me is A Swiftly Tilting Planet by Madeleine L'Engle. She's best known for A Wrinkle in Time, and this is from the same series, but it's, I think, the second or third book. For some reason, it's this book that I've reread, not A Wrinkle in Time. It's got a little bit of time travel. The main character is trying to change the course of history and get a different outcome. So there's this looping that happens and seeing the same event from different angles, or seeing it slowly shift and change over time. And I think that made it really fun to reread because I saw different things in the pattern each time. This is a weird one. One book that has really stuck with me over time is called Woman on the Edge of Time. And it's funny because it's this very dated looking book. I'm not even sure what made me pick it up, but it's basically just the author explaining what she thinks the ideal society might look like. And I'm not sure I agree with her on every point, but some of it's very interesting to imagine. And this was also the first time that I was exposed to characters who were trans and non-binary as a kid in a town that wasn't super progressive. So I feel like this really prepared me for some of my encounters with people as an adult, and just gave me a lot to think about that I might not normally have had brought to my attention when I was in high school. Certainly this wasn't like on my required reading list for my high school English class or anything like that. And it wouldn't be because it's from the 70s and was kind of like weird and edgy even in the 70s. But it gave me a lot to think about and I enjoyed it. And it's one that I've reread a couple times as well. Another book that I've reread several times that has made me cry several times is Flowers for Algernon. As a kid especially, I really related to him feeling isolated and like not quite being able to connect with other people around him. You know, and it's a tragedy. No matter how many times you reread it, it still ends the same way and you just want it to be different and it doesn't, because that's how books work. They have one ending. Yeah, so this one has made me cry a couple times. My favorite author of all time currently would have to be Jeff Vandermeer. I really enjoy the way he tells stories, but I also like the way he talks about writing. I'm really interested in following his blogs and some of his books about the writing process, and I just learn a lot from him. He's also given a couple talks with like local Audubon societies that I found interesting, and I like hearing what he has to say about local plants and being a gardener on top of what I like about the actual stories he writes. It shouldn't be a surprise that my favorite book is by my favorite author. I really liked Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. The pacing is just like, yes. I've read this book several times, and every time I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna read a little bit of it, or I don't have to read it. I don't have to read it super quickly. I can just lay back and enjoy it. And I always like start reading and just whoosh, gallop through it. I have to read the whole thing because I'm just hooked. It's like a fast moving river that just pulls you downstream. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this little book tag. If you feel inspired to share some of your own answers, definitely give us a shout out because we would love to hear about some of your favorite books. So thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.